The following has been paid for by the Pens World Order. Well, time to schedule our mandatory pain, boys and girls. The Pittsburgh Penguins have released their schedule for the 2025-2026 season, and my friends, the battle plan of tanking for Gavin, being below mediocre for McKenna, crashing over the cliff for McKenna is on. And dare I say, this might be a pretty tankable year. I know, you're going to get tired of hearing it. But boys and girls, that's the word of the year. Tank. If I had graphics, I could do that. But the schedule is out. Mandatory fun and mandatory pain is upon all of us. Like and subscribe, everyone. And don't forget, enjoy this content because the well's going to dry up in terms of hockey content for the next 2 months. So enough of my stalling. Let's get into this. I'm just going to give my rants and opinions over the games. I'm not going to go too in-depth into this. Apologies. That's what happens when you shotgun sodas. Anyway, so the Penguins preseason will feature 7 games. Gee, the CBA thing of cutting down preseason games from 6 to 4 might actually be a good idea. The Pens preseason will kick off Monday, September 22nd, as they will travel to take on Les Canadiens de Montreal. Another road game in Columbus on the 24th before they come back home for a 2-game home set against Detroit and the Columbus Blue Jackets. They'll go back to Detroit September 29th, and then a home-and-home set to end the preseason against the Buffalo Sabres. 7 games, 7 preseason games, and trust me, boys and girls, when I say this, you'll be happy on September 22nd, but by September 26th, you'll be begging for this preseason to end. But for all of you Pens fans who actually do this, that are more local out there, could be some good chances to see Rutger McGroarty and a few other ones out there. So the Pens season will kick off on the 4-letter network on Tuesday, October 7th, as we will travel to Madison Square Garden for an 8 o'clock start there against the New York Rangers. It's an 8 o'clock start because, well, they wanted to get the Panthers kickoff at 5 o'clock. Yeah, we're doing this thing again. The boys will make their home debut the following Thursday, October 9th, against the New York Islanders. Lovely. A rebuilding Pens team, a tanking Pens team against a rebuilding Islanders team. Boy, that's going to be a lot of fun. And we'll take on the other New York team. No, not Buffalo. We'll take on the Rangers again that Saturday at home before the Pens will take their first West Coast swing of the season, taking on the Ducks, Kings, and Sharks the following week. 10:30 start out there in Anaheim. 10 o'clock starts there with LA and San Jose. Should be interesting. I'm so glad I don't do... Well, I try to, because of my work schedule, I work weekends. So the West Coast games are a little bit harder for me to do. But at least, hey, they're knocking them out early. They come back home for a quick 1-game set against the Canucks, the Fighting Thatcher Demkos, before we go to take on Florida team on the 23rd as we will visit there in Sunrise. The boys will come back home for a 2-game set against Columbus and St. Louis before heading out to Philadelphia on the 28th. And that, my friends, is when the NHL in its infinite wisdom are going to do what they call face-off frenzy, which is where all 32 teams play on one night. We start at 6 o'clock, and for the first 2 hours, each game starts in 15-minute increments. Actually, all games start at 15-minute increments until 9 o'clock. The 9 o'clock game is New Jersey versus Colorado. And then after that will be 11. Will be half an hour starts until 11 o'clock, the last game on the docket, Kings versus Sharks. I don't mind this idea, but why the hell are we doing this in October? In the heart of Lord football. Think, NHL, think. You think on a rando Tuesday in January would be easier? I would say in February, but we can't exactly do that this year, and I'll tell you why. Anyway, Pens Flyers first time will be on the 28th, and then the boys will travel out for a Central Road swing on the 30th, taking on the Minnesota Wild, November 1st at Winnipeg, and then the boys will travel to the Great White North to take on the Fighting Steve Dangles Monday night, the November 3rd, there at Scotia. The boys will come back home to take on the Fighting Alex Ovechkins, known as the Washington Capitals. Last time ever? ? And then the Saturday, they'll travel out to Newark for a 12:30 start out there against the Fighting Jack Hughes. They'll come back home for a 2 o'clock start against the LA Kings. The LA Kings, which should be an interesting matchup. I always love that Jersey matchup between the two. They'll get a couple of days off before the boys will fly out to Sweden, as the Pens will be taking part in the International Showcase this year. 2 o'clock start on Friday, November 14th. That's taking all the way out there in Sweden. It's a home game for the Preds, so they lose 2 home games, and we lose 2 road games, so that's fine. 2 o'clock start there on November 14th, and a 9 a.m. start there on November 16th. If I wasn't working weekends, I'd actually kind of like that 9 a.m. start. The boys will come back home for a nice back-to-back home game set against the Wild and Kraken. We'll take on the 21st and 22nd. ADHD mind, I have to slow things down a second. The Pens will be back home for Thanksgiving Eve to take on the Fighting Tage Thompsons, as they'll take on the Buffalo Sabres. Off for Thanksgiving, then it's out to Columbus on Black Friday to take on the Sabres, and then the Pens will come back home the 29th to once again take on the Fighting Steve Dangles. We head into the month of December. Lots of games here, boys and girls. Road swing will start up as we'll take on the Flyers. December 1st, they're on a Monday. December 4th, they will go down to Tampa to take on the Lightning. And then Sunday, 6 o'clock start, over to Dallas. That's a heck of a roadie. They'll get 2 days off in between Tampa and Dallas, which is fine. And then back for a 5-game home swing in December to see him take on the Ducks, Habs, Sharks, the Utah Mammoth. That's going to take some getting used to. And the Oilers. Ducks, Habs, Sharks, Mammoth, Oilers. Things you will not see in Canada. Ha! Speaking of a Canadian road swing, a short Canadian road swing will happen in the next 3 out of 4 games, as the boys on the 18th will travel to take on the Ottawa Senators. Saturday night, they're in Place Bell to take on the Montreal Canadiens, December 20th. They'll come back home to take on the Habs in a Sunday night game, and then back out on December 23rd, 4 o'clock start to take on the Fighting Steve Dangles once again up there in Toronto, and that'll do it before Christmas. Coming back from Christmas, on the 28th, they will take on the Fighting Connor Bednards all the way out there in Chicago. Quick fly back home December 30th to take on the Carolina Hurricanes. And as we head into the new year, the calendar will indeed flip. Maybe I should take a drink. Sorry if I'm going fast, Pens fans. 89 games is a lot to cover. Is indeed a lot to cover. So, January 1st, no Winter Classic game for the boys this year, but they will be taking on Detroit, the Detroit Red Wings. Their 7 o'clock start there at PPG. They'll then fly out to Toronto the following Saturday, January 3rd, nooner. It is a noon start out there in Detroit, and then they will head down to Columbus the following day, January 4th, for a 3 o'clock start against the Columbus Blue Jackets. They'll come back home to take on the Devils and Flames. Devils on a Thursday, Flames on a Saturday at a 3:30 start there on a Saturday. Adjust your schedules accordingly. They'll then take a quick trip up to Boston for a 5 o'clock start up there in Boston. The boys will have a quick turnaround as they'll come back home on a Tuesday to take on the Tampa Bay Lightning, home against the Flyers on the 15th, and then against Columbus on the 17th. Nice little mini homestand there before the boys will head up to Canada. Well, actually, Seattle. They'll go to Seattle first, but can we really call Seattle Canada? It's kind of right there. Anyway, they'll take on the Kraken at a 5 o'clock start, as that will be a Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Not necessarily matinee, but an afternoon start, a 5 o'clock start out there in Seattle. The boys will then travel to Calgary to take on the Flames on the 21st. A back-to-back, the 21st and 22nd, the Flames, 22nd against the Oilers, and then 2 days off to head to the Canucks to take on the Fighting Thatcher Demkos there in Vancouver on the 25th. The Ontario Silvos revenge game will be a thing, assuming he's still a Penguin by that point. The boys will fly back home to take on the Chicago Blackhawks on January 29th, and then the Rangers for a 3:30 start there on the 31st, and then February 2nd at home against Ottawa. They will then have a quick turnaround to go play the Islanders that Tuesday, 7 o'clock start out there on Long Island, and then they'll take on the Buffalo Sabres on February 5th, and then everybody gets 2.5 weeks off because the Olympic break is back as we are going to Italy for this year's Olympics. And of course, our social medias will be flooded about who made the Olympic roster and who didn't. Now, there is still going to be an all-star event, I think, on the 7th. I don't know how they're going to do this. I think I read somewhere, like, if they are going to do an all-star game, kind of make it like an Olympic kickoff or an Olympic farewell or something. I don't know what this is going to be. So let's keep this going. The boys will come back from the Olympic break on the 26th to take on New Jersey, and then head out on the 28th to take on the New York Rangers. 12:30 start there at Madison Square Garden. Into March, lots of games. Trade deadline. We'll see what the boys will do at this point. March 1st, 1 o'clock start against the Vegas Golden Knights. It'll be nighttime there in Pittsburgh. Do I need to go to this game? Noted, as Megatron once said. The boys that Tuesday will go out to Boston to take on the Fighting David Pastrnaks out there in Boston. And then the 5th, they'll go up against Buffalo at home, 7th at home against Philly, and 8th at home against Boston. 10th on the road in Carolina. They'll fly out to Vegas on the 12th, and then the 14th, they will take on the Utah Mammoth. The 16th against the Fighting McKennas there in Colorado as they take on the Avalanche, and the 18th again in Raleigh to take on the Hurricanes. For all of you keeping track, that is 9 games in 18 days. It's every other day. Meeny, meeny, miny, mo. Catch a tiger by his toe. Every other day we go. Whew, I would not want that. That is nuts. And you're going to mix in the trade deadline by that point? You want to get nuts? Come on. Let's get nuts. Whew. The boys will come back home finally on the 21st. To take on the Fighting Connor Halibucks there again in Winnipeg against the Winnipeg Jets. 1 o'clock start, and then 3 o'clock start against the Hurricanes on the 22nd, and then the 24th will wrap up the homestead as the Fighting McKennas and the Colorado Avalanche will come to town. That is a 3-5 with a couple of home back-to-backs, but you'll get some home cooking there, and we'll see how different the roster could look at that point post-trade deadline. The 26th will have them going up to Ottawa and then coming back home the 28th against the Dallas Stars. The 30th will see them go out to Belmont to Long Island to take on the Islanders, and a quick return trip back home to take on the Detroit Red Wings. The 2nd will have them go down to Florida to take on the Tampa Bay Lightning, and then back up home for a double set against Florida team, the 4th and the 5th, 5 o'clock and 3 o'clock starts, respectively, against Florida team. They'll get a couple days off as they will head to Newark April 9th. The 11th will be the final home game against who else? The Fighting Ovechkins, the Washington Capitals. Last time ever between Crosby and Ovechkin? Question mark. And then they'll go to DC on the following day to take on the Capitals. And then the 14th, they will fly out to take on the St. Louis Blues on April 14th. 9:30 start there on a Tuesday, and that is the entirety of the Pittsburgh Penguins schedule, everyone. A good chunk to go through, a lot to go through, but that March is going to be filthy with that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 games in 18 days, and if you want to stretch that a little bit further, you'll have 12 games in 20 days. That is a hell of an endurance run, with the trade deadline going to be happening at that point, coming off an Olympic break. That is going to be a huge point for the boys. And you'll probably say, like, oh, well, they have every other days during the season. I mean, yeah, they have that in December, the 8th, 10th, 11th, 13th, 15th, and 17th. But 4 of those are at home. And yeah, one of them's out to Boston after a home game. But at least then you're coming back for a 3-game road swing, and that's not too bad. But it just seems like a lot there in the month of March. But when you have a 2-week break for the Olympics, you got to push things up at some point. So the boys get a little bit of that in December as well. Like when they have the 7th through the 13th is basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is basically 10 games in 16 days. But at least 6 of them are at home, and one of those is a return trip from Detroit. 2 of them are Ottawa and Montreal, which aren't too bad. It isn't too bad in terms of the schedule, but we'll see what the team does. The Penn season kicks off on the 7th. Their home opener is the 9th in Long Island, and will be eliminated from the playoffs by October 25th. Ha! I kid. So that's it. That's just me blowing through the schedule and seeing how things look. As everybody wants to crash for McKenna, that's what seems to be it. The schedule looks like that could happen. It could. But we'll just have to see. I'll take a look at the roster at another point in the summer, but that's it. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching this. Like and subscribe. I'll do some more summer content with the Pens. Let's go, Pens. We'll catch you next time.